This is On Nutrition, a podcast from Mayo Clinic where we dig into the latest nutrition trends and research to help you understand what's health and what's hype. I'm Tara Schmidt, a registered dietitian with Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. This episode, Obesity Phenotypes. Why is it that some people seem to shed weight easily, while others, no matter how hard they try, don't get the same results? Well, according to our guest, Dr. Andres Acosta, it's a combination of biology and genetics. Dr. Acosta runs the Precision Medicine for Obesity Lab at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and also founded the company Phenomics Sciences. He's a triple threat, a bariatrician, gastroenterologist, and internist, who doesn't ascribe to a one-size-fits-all approach to obesity. Instead, he believes in tailored treatment for each patient. Hi, Dr. Acosta. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Tara. Thank you so much for having me.
Tell us, how did you get interested in obesity research to start with?
When I was going through med school, I realized that we're doing super good by treating cancer. We made great progress in treating cardiovascular disease, but we were not doing good at preventive cancer or cardiovascular disease. And it turns out that both come from one root cause, which is obesity. So I decided to focus my career in trying to understand obesity. And then when I was going through my PhD, I started realizing that, we have different interventions. We have different approaches, different treatments. Back then, a few medications. Now, of course, a lot more medications. But we used to see this common, consistent topic. Doesn't matter what your intervention is. People who do amazing and people who do poorly. And the big question that we need to ask ourselves is why? Why would I inject myself once a week for a year and lose no weight with one of the new GLP-1s? Or why I will go and have bariatric surgery, change my anatomy of my gut, and I still don't lose weight? What is unique among those people who don't respond? But also, what's unique about those super responders? And that's what has driven me for now 20 years to try to study this question and try to come up with the answer of it.
We used to just kind of say it's lifestyle, and then we had surgeries, then procedures came. We always had some meds, like you mentioned, but now we have an even wider menu of options for people, and they want to know what's going to work for them, and not only in the short term, but in the long term.
Absolutely. Patients want to know. And then we also need to walk away from, if you didn't respond, it's probably because you didn't hear my advice or you didn't do what I told you. We need to stop blaming patients.
Completely agree.
Obesity is a disease with a strong pathophysiology that we need to understand. For you and I that have been doing obesity for many years, it's so exciting to have so many options.
Yes.
Now we need to find which patient needs what and when.
We've been waiting a long time for this, right? You and I and the rest of the medical field. First, we know BMI isn't a perfect tool for diagnosing obesity, but it can be an indicator of someone's adiposity, or the amount of body fat someone has. So obesity is a disease where you have an excess amount of adiposity to the point where it's impairing your health. So Dr. Acosta, how else can you measure adiposity outside of BMI?
You can measure the percentage of body fat, either using a body composition such as a DEXA machine, a bioimpedance, or more fancy tools like an MRI machine. And that will tell you what's your severity compared to someone who do not have obesity. Now, what we need to understand is that the excess of adiposity for someone with a little bit more fat might already turn into disease or into a health risk, and someone will have more adiposity and not turn into health risk. And that's why the definition of both our CDC as well as the WHO of obesity, defining as a disease, is when it says that when the excess of adiposity starts creating a risk of another disease.
How do you determine why people are gaining weight to the point of obesity?
So people are gaining weight because of many different reasons. A great example that I think is very simple for everyone to understand is if I'm a super athlete and I suddenly stop training because I get injured, but I continue to eat, and use the example of Michael Phelps. He was eating 6,000 calories, but he was also in the pool for about 6 hours a day. He stopped training, but he continued to overconsume calories. He will gain weight. Simple example. I gain weight because I stop exercising and I continue to consume calories. Another example is you get a medication that increases your appetite, and that medication is for something else, such as a steroid that we use a lot of time in medicine. Increases my appetite, makes me retain fluids, I'm going to gain weight. Those examples are rare. Now, what happens in common obesity? We know that people are gaining weight throughout the years. And the question again, why? a lot of us actually are trying to lose weight or trying to maintain our weight. And we still, despite of that, we keep having issues. What we start realizing is that there were groups of people. And we start grouping patients in which was the most predominant actionable trait or phenotype.
And when you say phenotype, you're talking about obesity phenotypes or subgroups. Can you walk us through what those 4 key obesity phenotypes are?
The first one is people with abnormal calories to satiation. They consume high calories before they feel full. So they come to one sitting, they start eating, and they go for seconds and thirds, and they can eat more than 2,000 calories in one sitting. I say the abnormal satiation is hungry brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's different than people who come to our tests, start eating, and they feel full with normal amounts of food. And then they feel hungry again within an hour or two. Their stomach empty faster. And then the signals that come through the gut to the brain are not working appropriately. And they feel hungry in between meals. That's hungry gut. But these are separate than people who might want to eat a lot in one sitting, but are eating because not of their biology, but more because of their hedonic behavior in which they're looking for reward. So that emotional eating, stress eating behavior is like, oh boy, I'm doing a podcast later with Tara today. I'm so stressed out. I'm going to eat something before, right? That isn't a stress eating behavior. And then the last group of patients that we realize is there's a group of patients who are not burning enough calories. When we measure their energy expenditure, they are slow burners.
So we have hungry brain, which we feel like we need to eat more in order to reach the feeling of satiety or feeling satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Hungry gut, we digest our food faster and therefore feel hungrier faster because an empty stomach is going to say to your brain, let's eat again. Emotional eating, which is fairly self-explanatory,
Mm-hmm.
and slow burning, which is a clinically relevant kind of decreased metabolic rate.
That's correct.
And hormones like leptin or ghrelin play a role in these phenotypes too, right?
Yeah. So, of course, hormones play a major role. So we know that leptin, released from adipose tissue, needs to go to our brain, but also to our gut, and tell us whether I have little storage in my fat cells or a lot of storage. So think about your warehouse. Leptin is the signal. Empty warehouse, overflown warehouse, right? And that signal is to go to the brain. Beautiful biology. Unfortunately, in obesity, we develop leptin resistance. So about 90% of people with obesity have high leptin levels, but the signal is not really getting to the patient saying, hey, the warehouse is already at overflow. We need to slow down and stop getting more calories in. That signal is not working.
Okay, so that's leptin, our warehouse capacity manager that the body stops listening to sometimes. What about ghrelin?
While ghrelin is an appetite hormone, it releases from our gut, particularly when the stomach is emptied.
Mhm.
And before we eat, we have the highest levels of ghrelin. And that hormone will go up to our brain and tell our brain, hey, it's time to eat something. Also will go to our stomach and help us growl that stomach, those sounds that we feel we're feeling hungry.
I remember in college, that's how everyone remembers that ghrelin is the growling
Yeah.
hormone, right? Ghrelin
It's the
makes you
growling.
hungry.
Yeah, that's the perfect name. Ghrelin the growling, yes. What is very interesting is that in patients with hungry brain, we tend to see a little bit more leptin resistance. And we did not see any difference with ghrelin, which is an interesting observation and clearly tell us that a lot more studies are needed.
And you can actually get tested to identify your specific obesity phenotype, like we're talking about. So tell us about that process.
So at Mayo, we built a genetic test that involves machine learning and genetics. So here we have a genotype that produces a phenotype that drives to a disease. And we can actually predict your phenotype, right? And now that genetic test has been spun out into a company, as well as with Mayo Clinic, and that's been commercially available.
That's pretty fascinating. If someone wanted to learn their phenotype, but did not necessarily have access or didn't want to get tested, do they have an option to learn more about their phenotype?
Yeah, so of course, very few academic centers are doing this kind of testing. We spin out this company, as I mentioned before, called Phenomic Sciences, which is a Mayo Clinic spin-out company that has the genetic test and the questionnaires to identify the phenotypes. And I think that has been a wonderful way of providing access to patients who want to understand and know their underlying phenotype and the reason why they struggle with obesity. And now there's about 300 clinics around the United States and a few other countries that are already offering this genetic test. but the test still not reimbursed. So still is a out-of-pocket cost, which unfortunately that takes time. But I understand that the company is working day and night to get through that reimbursement process so it can be covered by insurance. And hopefully that will happen next year.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
There are 4 key obesity phenotypes. First, there's hungry brain, when you need to consume a lot of calories just to feel full. Then there's hungry gut. This is for people who feel full with a normal amount of food, but they digest faster and feel hungry again within an hour or 2. Other people have an emotional eating phenotype, where eating becomes a coping mechanism. And then there are the slow burners, people with a decreased metabolic rate who don't burn enough calories. Hormones like leptin and ghrelin play a role in obesity too. Leptin communicates to our gut and brain to tell us how full we may be. But sometimes, if a person has leptin resistance, that signal won't go through. For ghrelin, think growling. This hormone communicates to the stomach and brain that it's hungry. And now that phenotype testing is available, you can figure out which obesity phenotype applies to you. Next, we'll learn about how genetics can play a role in developing obesity. Do you ever have patients fall into more than one of your phenotype categories, or maybe none at all even?
About almost a third of the patients have 2 or more phenotypes. What is interesting is if you have 2 or more phenotypes, you have higher body weight, so you're heavier, and you have more risk of obesity-related diseases, more risk of cardiovascular disease, more risk of diabetes. So it tells you that if you have 2 or more problems in your phenotypes, you're going to have more severe obesity.
Do demographics have an effect on our phenotypes? I'm sure you've heard the assumption out there that women are more likely to be emotional eaters, for example. What does the science say?
So every single decision we make and every study we make, we consider sex as a biological factor. And using sex and not gender because we look at their genetics. As you can imagine, men might consume a little bit more calories than women, but then the prevalence of all these phenotypes is exactly the same for men and women. So we cannot say that one has more than the other. No.
Okay.
Women do not have more emotional eating than men. Let's put that out there, right?
Yeah.
Men also have stress eating behaviors and emotional eating. Same thing with slow burn, and same thing with hungry brain, hungry gut. We also have looked whether race might be different. And we actually were delighted to study that in 150 people from different ethnic and racial backgrounds, and we saw no difference based on race or ethnicity. The question that remains out there that I'm not 100% sure is age.
Okay.
Seems like if you are younger and you have obesity, you might be more predisposed to have hungry brain and hungry gut than the other 2 phenotypes. Emotional eating seems to be coming more towards your 40s and 50s.
Okay.
And then the slow burn is something we see more in the 40s and 50s as well, more in the 50s.
Okay.
So maybe there's a component there of chronological presentation, and the first 2 have more a genetic predisposition, while the other 2 might be more environmental as well as how we adopt and cope with life.
Yeah, and that was exactly my next question of, do these develop over time and what factors are contributing? So age itself and the impact that age has on metabolism might be one factor.
Yeah.
Life events might be one factor, or how we cope, etc.
One of our colleagues, Maria Daniela Hurtado, she's an endocrinologist in Mayo Clinic, Florida. She's studying this question about menopause and how menopause affects phenotypes, which I think is a fascinating question. And hopefully eventually we also study andropause because men are also going through metabolic changes as we age. But it's important to understand what happens to our body. We know we start losing muscle mass when we age. Is that the driver on a slow burn phenotype at older age, or maybe not? So those questions we need to know. But we were very lucky to get a grant and support from Novo Nordisk, the Danish pharmaceutical company, who was very interesting about this question, whether the phenotypes who present early in life will predict weight gain. People with the genetic predisposition for hungry brain or high calories to satiation, they tend to gain more weight before the age of 25 than people with the other 3 phenotypes, which is a very interesting observation, right? It tells you about the strength of genetics into the development of obesity and the explanation of why obesity is a biological disease.
Once you've found out a patient or research subject's phenotype, you essentially have different protocols for them to follow because everyone has different needs. So, do you want to talk about some of the protocols that you have them follow?
The core principle of Mayo is the patient's interest come first. And the reason why we're doing this research is not because I want to understand the genetics and how we feel full. I need to understand how my patients feel full and how I'm going to treat my patients. So, quoting my mentor, Michael Camilleri, he told me when I joined Mayo, whatever you study in the morning, you need to help your patient in the afternoon. And whatever you learn that afternoon, you need to study next morning.
I like that.
If I know your biology and I know every single diet that has been tried out there and every single medication, how can I match them? How can I pair them together?
Yeah.
And the beauty of what we have done is that I like to say we did not invent anything. Michael Camilleri, Matt Clark, and then Dr. Donald Hensrud, we came together, we say, okay, we have these 4 phenotypes. What are the 4 diets? And here's what we came up with. If you have hungry brain, we said, okay, what is 2 good diets that work for hungry brain? Barbara Rolls published on the 90s, the volumetric diet.
Mm-hmm.
It's still very popular. We now talk about eating more servings of salads, right? To make you feel full.
Yes.
So Barbara Rolls developed a diet that was developed for high calories to satiation. And then the other thing we know for people with high calories to satiation is that they usually don't feel hungry at breakfast. So we told them, hey, do time restrictive eating. In other simple words, skip breakfast. And they were actually happy because they were forcing themselves to have breakfast because we've been telling people you need to have breakfast, right? So we told these people low calorie diet, volumetric, 1 to 2 meals per day, either breakfast and lunch or lunch and dinner. 95% of our patients chose lunch and dinner. Big volumetric diet. Think about a big salad with some protein on top that it takes you a lot of time to eat.
Okay, that's hungry brain. What about hungry gut?
For hungry gut, again, we didn't invent anything. A dear friend and colleague from University of Adelaide, Michael Horowitz, he has been talking about this preload diet. What is a preload diet? Having a protein snack before your main meal. Now think about this. Protein snack. Most of our snacks have very little protein, right?
Yeah. Go in your pantry. There's not a lot of protein in there. Yeah.
No. That bar that you want to eat or that even fruit or veggie that you want to snack in the middle of the day, not much protein. But now we say protein snack. Why? Protein will make a high release of GLP-1, PYY, CCK, go to your brain, tell you to feel full longer. And we said, I think that's the diet for hungry guts. Emotional hunger, we just need to talk about their emotions. And what we need to do, I like to compare this to when you go to Alcoholics Anonymous. You walk into a room and you know that everyone has that phenotype.
Yeah.
Now we bring them to the room and they're going to cognitive behavioral therapy, everyone knowing that everyone has emotional eating. So it's easy to share your emotions. It's easier to go down and do really cognitive behavioral therapy when you actually know you're talking with a group of people who everyone shares the same phenotype.
Yeah.
That if you go to a group that there's all sort of phenotypes, there will be people say, I have emotional eating, and the other one says, oh, I don't. Why you have that? Like, come on, right? Mm-hmm. You shut down yourself and you stop talking. In this case, it's the opposite. Everybody opens up. And the last group, with people with a slow burn, these folks are not burning calories. They have low muscle mass. And then we told them, okay, simple. You go to the gym and then you do resistance training with high interval intensity training HIIT, and then protein supplementation after the workouts. So instead of telling everyone needs to do everything, hungry brain, hungry gut, you only focus on your diet. Emotional eating, you focus on that cognitive behavioral therapy. And slow burn, the only group that was told to focus on exercise and resistance training and protein supplementation after each exercise routine. And then we took this rather simplistic diet. Again, we didn't invent it. We just paired it to the right biology. And we compared it against a group that we told them everyone does everything. Diet, behavioral therapy, and exercise. So we compared less, but tailored and phenotype tailored versus comprehensive and everyone got everything. Turns out that less is more weight loss. 8% weight loss in 12 weeks versus 4%. And if we look at each one of the phenotypes improve. And when we measure their biology of each one of the phenotypes, their biology improve in each one of the phenotypes, including the people that we told them to go to the gym. They lost 8% also at 1 year, and they gain 15% of muscle mass. So tells you that you don't have to be very smart in life. You just need to have right observations. Pairing the biology to previously known diets actually really improve outcomes. And now we're using that in the clinic.
And how meaningful for, you and I who know the patients who've come into our offices and said, I have done this my entire life. I have done everything under the sun to lose weight. I know more about weight loss than you do. To finally be told, I have something for you that's actually tailored to you, and it's more exact and honestly less work than what you've likely been following.
Yeah.
You would have assumed that the people who were doing the diet thing and the psychology thing and the exercise thing, of course they're going to lose more weight. But that wasn't true.
But Tara, what is fascinating is so many of our patients says, Doc, I want to know if my breast cancer is BRCA positive.
Yes.
Or I want to know whether I have the risk because my mother or my grandmother had breast cancer. And why in obesity, we try so many different things, but we don't look for that diagnostic test, that genetic test, that measurement of your metabolism. And if we think obesity is a disease, it should treat like every other. We should find diagnostic tests. We should get to the bottom of it. You should get to the root cause. And there will be people who tell them, yes, it's your emotions. But there will be people who say, no, it's more like your gut-brain axis, your regulation of appetite, or is your metabolism. You're not burning enough calories.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the more we do this, we'll be able to find more things. Maybe it's your microbiota, as you use an example.
Yeah.
Maybe it's your fat is producing too many inflammatory toxins, your adipocytes. We should measure those things. So it's time that we take obesity seriously, not only calling it a disease, but actually treating as such.
What you're doing and what you're showing patients is that this is not a behavioral problem. This is not a you problem. This is not a, quote, laziness. But that's what obesity bias is it's making assumptions about the behaviors of people with the diagnosis of obesity.
Every time I give a diagnosis or I give an answer to my patients, I get unexpected tears. And it's a mix of tears of sadness, but also of relief.
Yeah.
And the sadness is because they finally got an answer to their lifelong struggles. It's like, okay, now I understand why I want to eat snacks all the time and always thinking about food.
Yeah.
Or why I have to eat the whole pizza and I cannot stop at 2 slices, right? But at the same time, it's a relief because suddenly people understand why they have to struggle with this disease. People are extremely disciplined that do everything else right, but unfortunately they struggle with this disease. And now we give them an answer. And that is prices. It's just changed the conversation of my patients forever to the point that they come and see me. My hungry gut is well controlled, doc. Thank you.
Yeah. It's life-changing for those patients. Almost a third of patients being treated for obesity will have 2 or more obesity phenotypes. They generally have a higher body weight and a higher risk of obesity-related diseases like cardiovascular disease and diabetes. When it comes to demographics, there's no difference between obesity phenotypes across sex or racial background, but age may play a role. People who are younger and have obesity may be more predisposed to have the hungry brain and hungry gut phenotypes. And people with the predisposition for hungry brain tend to gain more weight before the age of 25 than people with the other 3 phenotypes. So it's likely that genetics has a hand at play here. But the emotional eating and slow burn phenotypes have a higher prevalence in people who are in their 40s or 50s, meaning our environment and life events, and how we cope with them, could possibly play a role in our phenotypes developing over time too. Your obesity phenotype gives doctors a pathway for how to tailor your treatment. For hungry brain, the best approach is following a volumetric diet. Feed that heightened need for calories by volume with low-calorie foods like more fruits and vegetables. Time-restricted eating, a form of intermittent fasting, may also work well. For hungry gut, doctors recommend the preload diet. Before your main meal, have a protein snack. This will release hormones that tell your brain to feel fuller for longer. Emotional hunger has a psychological aspect that cognitive behavioral therapy can address. And for slow burn, lifting weights and high-intensity interval training works best, along with supplementing your workouts afterwards with protein. These are all lifestyle changes patients can make to work with their body. Next up, do obesity phenotypes also determine which medications, procedures, and surgery might work best for someone? Now, the protocols that you shared thus far had to do with lifestyle. So where do medications, procedures, and surgery play a role? So obviously there are qualifications for all of those things. You don't just get bariatric surgery because you have obesity. There are criteria, of course. Are there connections between these phenotypes and personalizing their treatment pathways when necessary past lifestyle?
Absolutely. And that's how we actually started studying this. In 2015, we compared phenotypes to anti-obesity medications. And we continue to evolve until now, in which we actually have paired a medication to each one of the phenotypes. So for hungry brain, this high calories to satiation, you can use a first generation medication called phentermine topiramate extended release, brand name Simia, but you can also find a generic, which makes it great because it's affordable. It's only, depending where you pick it up, 40 to 60 bucks a month. And this medication works great for hungry brain. And we have the highest level of evidence that this actually is going to work for this phenotype. A double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial, 1 year length.
That's great.
If you're hungry brain positive, either by the biological trait, by measuring the calories, or by the genetic test, you're going to lose 17.7% of total body weight loss. So when you're thinking about Wegovy and Zepbound, like Mounjaro and tirzepatide and semaglutide and all these things, this medication with this phenotype works equally than these other medications.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, right?
Yeah.
Now with the GLP-1s, we have shown in publications already that exenatide and liraglutide, both first generation GLP-1s, work for hungry gut, and semaglutide works great for hungry gut as well, at an impressive response rate. If you are hungry gut positive and you get semaglutide, 19% of total body weight loss at 1 year. Remember, the trials only show us, depending where you are, 15 to 16%,
Mm-hmm.
19%. Now, if you're a non-responder, only going to lose 10%.
Still significant, though, honestly.
So 10% is not bad, right?
Yeah.
But that 10% can go into another medication, such as Qsimia, and lose 17.7%.
Yes.
And the difference is that 10% with Sema, which is not bad, could be better with Qsimia, and you can be paying, depending on your co-payments, insurance or not. If you're paying out of pocket, it will go from 1,000 to 500 for Sema or tirzepatide. It could go down to 40 to 50 on Qsimia, right? So it's fascinating how tailored phenotype-guided intervention we can improve. So GLP-1s for hungry gut.
Which make complete sense, right? Because it delays gastric emptying. That's exactly what someone is struggling with when they have hungry gut.
Correct. But people with hungry gut also feel hungry in between meals. So also GLP-1 goes to the brain and also tells the brain, hey, don't feel hungry in between meals.
Yeah.
And hunger, your food noise is gone. Beautiful responders. And then with a medication called naltrexone bupropion, Contrave, that has been used for obesity, approved for obesity in 2014, that those are the best responders for emotional eating. It's like no-brainer. You give an antidepressant with a medication for addiction, you put them together, people lose a little bit of weight. You give it to the right people, 12% weight loss.
Yeah.
But significant improvement of anxiety and depression. So not only you treat the emotional eating, you also treat the underlying root cause of the anxiety and depression that is driving you to eat. The GLP-1s don't do that. Now here comes a little bit of disappointing news. For slow burn folks, there's not a medication. So it's sad because we wish we can say, oh, there's a medication for each one of them. So what we've been using for slow burns is, hey, your medication is the gym. So don't pay for a med, pay for a gym membership, really go to the gym. And if you're struggling with hunger while you're trying to decrease a little bit your calories and you're trying to exercise, we can use any of the medications I just mentioned, including phentermine alone, as an appetite suppressant. But none of the medications currently available, FDA approved, will increase your metabolism. So it's fascinating to see that at least for the 3 phenotypes, we have FDA approved medications, and we can use medications for that 4th phenotype and really improve outcomes. So it's great because we're pairing the biology of a patient with medication, improving out. We also have shown that we can improve outcomes with devices, with endoscopic sleeve gastroplasty, that we suture the stomach from internally. They respond better if they're a hungry gut phenotype. And we show that in a multi-center study with 50 patients. And finally, for surgery, we have shown that people with the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass tend to do better if they have a hungry gut.
That's exciting. Do you have kind of an ultimate goal with the work that you're doing? What would you love to accomplish that you haven't already?
We want to get down to understanding the biology of each one of our patients.
Wow.
And each patient to understand why they have struggled with obesity through their lives. Once we understand that, I want to pair them to the right intervention and then find a way to monitor that, whether they have responded or whether we need to think about adding another agent or switching it to something else. So we need to understand when do we are able to really control your disease to see whether you need to continue on the therapy or not. So that's going to be a combination of diet interventions, medications, devices. But we need to think obesity is a chronic disease, a journey. Yeah. We don't stop living without obesity. All of us are in this constant journey. And the journey that we're experiencing now in our lives is a good journey because we live in abundance of calories.
Yeah.
And I like to say, that's actually we see it as a good thing because before we were starving and it was not pleasant. So the fact that we're living in abundance in the history of humankind since we were created is a good thing. We just need to understand how we're going to survive in this new journey. Hopefully we'll continue to live in abundance. And the fact that we can have more than one meal a day, we can have multiple meals a day, and we can think about whether the type of food that I'm eating, how that's affecting my biology and my own genetics. So we need to really get down to understanding these are my genetics. Everything else that I keep putting on top of it is my exposure, what I'm exposed to.
Yes.
And we need to understand the next layer will be having a genetic biomarker with these extra layers on top.
Yeah.
Either microbiome, metabolomics, proteomics, what is our exposomics. And then really understand that and hopefully have tests that we can make the diagnosis at baseline and then follow you throughout the years.
Yeah. We live in a different type of challenging environment.
Yeah.
An obesogenic environment, if we want to use that term, but a different type of challenge than our ancestors.
So now we have these starvation pathways ready to go, ready to eat a lot.
And would you say understanding our genetic history is an important part of being successful long-term with weight loss?
When we start losing weight, our phenotypes might get more pronounced or more important. But we also go through life, right? And in life, we're exposed to different things. So for example, I've had a lot of my patients who came to COVID who did not have emotional eating. And I know that because I saw them before COVID, that they were already normal weight, who were calling me during the COVID pandemic and saying, I'm having emotional eating now. I'm in my house, I'm working from home, I'm snacking from my fridge, I cannot stop. What should I do? Clearly a situation of a lot of stress with access to food, and you don't know what to do. They're a new phenotype. So it's important that we understand this because it's not static, it's very dynamic. And then I have patients who have reached a very low normal weight. And I've tried to taper down their GLP-1s and they cannot because their hunger continues to come back.
Yeah.
So clearly the biology has not been reset.
Yeah.
Or their genetic predisposition is so strong that they might not be able to walk away without a tool to help fight back their biology.
Yeah.
But we will only know those things, Tara, if we start measuring things. Otherwise, we're practicing a trial and error obesity medicine.
Yep.
And we're making blinded decisions with no evidence to support what we do.
Not only exhausting for the medical professional, but even more so for the patient, emotionally, physically, financially sometimes as well.
It's a life journey, and we have made a great step towards making the initial diagnosis. Now we need to build the follow-up tools for monitoring and knowing who needs what when.
Well, Dr. Acosta, I am very grateful and fascinated by what you do, and I know that the world will continue to be watching and seeing what you guys are up to next. So thank you for all that you do for our patients, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Tara, for the invitation.
Doctors have figured out which diets work best for each type of obesity, and they've done the same with medications, procedures, and surgeries too. And they know who will respond best to those interventions. What's most important, though, is not just the intervention itself, but the follow-up. Scientists are still learning how our bodies are affected by our phenotypes. They also aren't static throughout our lives. Our phenotypes can change with life events and circumstances. We can't always reset our biology, and sometimes our genetic predispositions are so strong that we'll need a continued intervention, like medication, the rest of our lives. That said, the science continues to grow, and we can look forward to learning more and more about our bodies and obesity in the future. That's all for this episode, but if you have a follow-up question, leave us a voicemail at 507-538-6272, and we'll answer it in a future episode. For more On Nutrition episodes and resources, check us out online at mayoclinic.org/onnutrition. And if you found this show helpful, please subscribe and make sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. It really helps others find our show. Thanks for listening, and until next time, eat well and be well.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as medical or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider for any medical questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity does not constitute an endorsement of or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.